Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Dr. DeAngela Burns-Wallace and excited to have you all join us today for our webinar at the Kauffman Foundation. We are here to talk about our grant-making relaunch. We kicked off a little over a month ago, so it is exciting to continue to have these conversations. They have rolled and evolved over the last month, and so today we hope to just share with you and walk through the key components of our initiatives. We really are focused on closing economic mobility gaps and positioning Kansas City in a way that we are a national model for equitable economic mobility by 2035. We truly believe that the strategy that we have developed helps us drive towards closing economic gaps in the Kansas City region. And most importantly, we believe that focus on collaboration with all of you can help create better opportunities for everyone. For us, and the why behind our priorities is simple, but it is truly powerful. We're committed to creating more opportunities and closing more gaps for the most underserved communities, ensuring that the power of their economic future lies within their hands. What do we mean when we say the Kansas City region? We mean the following 6 counties: Cass, Clay, Jackson, Johnson, Platte, and Wyandotte counties. But does that mean that you have to be an organization located in these counties to do the work? That's a no. Our requirements are that organizations' activities or the proposal of the activities fall within our strategic priorities and our focus areas. And that in particular, these activities have the potential for impact in and throughout the Kansas City region. Throughout our conversation today, my colleagues that are joining me from the foundation will walk you through different aspects of our grant making to answer just these types of questions. So our speakers today, along with myself, are my colleagues, Allison Greenwood Bajracharya, our Chief Impact and Strategy Officer, and Dr. Yvonne Owens Ferguson, our Chief Research, Learning, and Evaluation Officer. So I want to go quickly over just an idea to give you an idea of what today's agenda is going to be like. I'll do a quick overview of our strategic refresh, including insights from our community conversations. And then Allison will delve into the details of the grant making relaunch, covering our philosophy, the focus of our grant making, and she will take you through different grant types and pathways that are available under our strategic refresh. And then finally, Dr. Yvonne will share how we are approaching our metrics to track impact and our reporting requirements for our grants that recently opened. She will share information on our community outreach efforts and dates and resources to help you to continue to engage and follow along with updated information. I will then pull us all back together and see if we can answer a few of the questions that you have. Throughout the day, you will see notes that will drop into the chat from our team. And so please make sure that you're tracking on those as we begin this conversation. So as we jump into our strategic refresh really is a culmination of extensive research and community engagement. We wanted to ensure that our approach not only honors the legacy of our founder, Ewing Marion Kauffman, but it also reflects the needs and the aspirations of our community today. We began this process by engaging with a wider range of stakeholders across the Kansas City region and throughout the nation. Over the last year, we've been in community, gathering insights, reflecting on our previous work, and considering how we can be more effective in driving economic mobility. So we didn't develop these strategies in isolation. We conducted a series of community conversations to gather feedback, to learn from people throughout this region and partners all over, those that are best situated to help us understand our communities. Our community conversations gave us the opportunity to hear from individuals in the field, what questions and concerns they had, where they felt we could add the best value. During the past year, we spent hours listening and engaging along with other Kauffman leadership and tried to truly take the feedback as it has been invaluable. It has shaped every aspect of the strategic refresh. We heard loud and clear that people want more than just a resource. They want a foundation that is engaged, that is responsive, and deeply connected to community. Our vision is clear. By 2035, we want to see Kansas City where everyone has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their background. Our role is to truly help to dismantle systemic barriers throughout our community. Once again, placing the power back into those communities to control their own economic future. To achieve this, we've identified 3 strategic priorities: college access and completion, where we want to ensure that more students not only enroll in college, but also are completing their degrees for all students in our communities. Workforce and career development, to connect people with the skills, the opportunities they need to succeed in today's markets. That early exploration, understanding what is needed to be successful. And entrepreneurship, to support new and existing businesses that can drive our economic growth and job creation, supporting and sustaining business ownership. Now I'm going to hand it off to Allison, who will talk a little bit about our grant-making relaunch and take you through the rest of our strategy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Allison Greenwood Bajracharya. I'm so grateful for you joining us today. I'm aware that there are some sports competitions happening at the same time, so we are especially grateful for your time here with us and look forward to your questions. As Dr. DeAngela mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about our focus areas, our philosophy, our grant-making pathways, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Yvonne and open it up to questions. So since the spring, when we established and rolled out our new vision and priorities, we spent some time articulating our focus areas. And our focus areas are intended to provide more specificity and coherence across all of our priority areas. Our focus areas include essential competencies and skills, which is equipping individuals with the mindsets, behaviors, and skills needed to succeed in both school and career. So for example, we're interested in mentoring, coaching, particularly if it is integrated into job or real-world learning experience. The second focus area is education and employer connection. So strengthening ties between education providers and employers to ensure that our workforce is prepared and relevant. An example of this is creating innovative pathways from school to employment. The third focus area is participation and belonging, cultivating an environment where everyone else feels seen, valued, and able to contribute, regardless of their background. For example, this could be initiatives that focus not only on creating access, but also supporting continued engagement and advancement in college, work, or business ownership. And then finally, our fourth focus area is equitable access, making learning pathways affordable and capital accessible to all learners, workers, and entrepreneurs. For example, here we mean an intermediary lender that may focus on minority-owned businesses. So this is a lot of information. There's more specifics on our website. I encourage you to check that out. And there are more examples of what we mean when we talk about these focus areas as well. In addition to developing our focus areas, we spent some time developing our grant-making philosophy and goals. This was critical to our grant-making relaunch. There are 4 tenets to our grant-making philosophy. The first is proximity to community. So we're committed to staying close to the communities we serve, ensuring that our work is informed by your experience and needs. The second is getting uncomfortable. So we're willing to take risks and address tough challenges head on. This means embracing innovation and being open to new approaches, even when they push us out of our comfort zones. The third is achieving impact. You'll hear us talk a lot about impact and focus on impact, where leaders are focused on driving meaningful, measurable results. Everything we do is aimed at creating real, lasting change. And the fourth is about creating hope. Through research-driven innovation and collaboration with changemakers like you all, we aim to foster hope in the communities we serve. We know those are critical to achieving our vision at 2035. So with our focus areas in play and our grant-making philosophy developed, we've rolled out a number of new grant-making pathways. I'm going to provide a high-level overview of them quickly, Again, we have more information on our website, and we'll spend some time answering questions. But as a preview to what they are, these are the grant making pathways that are going to be open over the course of the next year. The first one is capacity building grants, which is currently open. And so if you are considering applying this round, we are hopeful that you've already tuned in online, because the applications are due next week on the 8th. But these grants are intended to help organizations strengthen their internal operations so they can have a greater impact. Again, the application is open and is due the first round October 8th. This opportunity will open up again in the spring. The second is our collective impact grant. Dr. DeAngela mentioned the notion of collaboration and coalition building. This is really where that is centered. So these grants are for coalitions of high capacity organizations that are working together to drive systems level change. We're particularly interested in projects related to education and employer connection, as well as equitable access. So those two focus areas I mentioned. Applications are open now, and they are due November 1st. These are really intended for coalitions that are either already existing and are ready to name the problem and dive into a deep planning process, or have been sort of emerging over the past few months. And this is an opportunity now to catalyze that the coherence in defining the problem and the opportunity for planning to address that. Project grants. So these provide funding for specific projects that align with our strategic priorities, whether it's a new initiative or the scaling of an existing one. Letters of interest submissions open October 15th in 2 weeks, and we will have a webinar with more detail on those in 2 weeks on October 15th. Research grants also open on October 15th through a letter of interest. These grants are intended to support research that deepens our understanding of the issues we're addressing and translates findings into practical solutions. Additionally, for organizations that no longer see themselves aligned with our priority areas and focus areas, but have received long-term funding, we are presenting sunset grants. These are only available to previous grantees with projects that are winding down and no longer align with our current priorities. It's one-time funding opportunity will help organizations transition to new sources or bring closure to their work. Applications are open now and extend all the way through March. Finally, in January, we're launching the Uncommon Leadership Award. So this award will honor leaders who are making a significant impact in the Kansas City region through innovative, generous, and meaningful work. So again, we're really grateful that you are here today to learn more. We are hosting additional webinars in the coming weeks. We will detail those at the end. Before I pass it on to Dr. Yvonne, I did want to just go ahead and get in front of a couple questions that have emerged in a number of the webinars and office hours we've had to date. So first, can you apply for multiple grants? So organizations should identify the grant that most closely aligns with your specific needs and really focus on a single grant application. That said, we recognize there are larger institutions that may have multiple divisions that are aligned with our priority areas and focus areas. And in those unique instances, we will consider multiple grant applications from organizations like that. However, we will not accept or consider multiple applications from an institution that are applying for multiple times to be the lead in a collective impact. So if you're applying to be the lead in a collective impact proposal, we really only want you to apply for one. We know that is a huge lift, and we want to make sure organizations are well positioned to be able to pull that off. The other nuance to provide here is that if organizations are part of a collective impact coalition, but they aren't the lead entity, they're applying as a coalition member, you can also apply for another grant in a different pathway. Another question we've received regularly is, do you have to be a 501c3 to apply? So you are not required to be a 501c organization to apply. However, you do have to ensure you're applying for something that has charitable purposes at the center of it. So if you need more guidance on that, please email us directly. We've also received a question consistently about, do we fund political activity or advocacy? So we do fund strategic advocacy, education, and other policy engagement activities that do not constitute lobbying, but we do not fund lobbying or elections activity. All right, that's a quick preview of some of the questions that have come our way. I'm now going to pass it over to Dr. Yvonne to talk about our approach to performance and metrics, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. So now I'm going to share how research, learning, and evaluation will intersect with our grant-making approach. Our overall aim with research, evaluation, and learning is to catalyze the grant-making strategy and also facilitate and communicate grant learnings. So throughout our strategic refresh process, we leveraged research and data to guide our decision-making around our strategic priorities and focus areas that Allison discussed. We selected priorities that are evidence-based drivers of economic mobility. And we selected focus areas that are evidence-based drivers of our strategic priorities. That said, we are launching this strategy knowing that we don't have all the answers. We must engage with community to build a greater and deeper understanding of what closes economic mobility gaps. We are excited to collaborate with researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and also community members to ask questions, test hypotheses, and dig deeper into our focus areas to build collective understanding of what drives outcomes. Next slide. So our approach to evaluation and grant making is collaborative learning. And this slide mirrors the questions around metrics and the expectations around reporting that are communicated in the application portal. So in the application, you will see that we have asked applicants to tell us if they are collecting specific economic mobility metrics and to share additional metrics they collect and tracked. We are asking these questions not because we're asking you to report on these metrics, but to learn from and understand how organizations aligned to our strategic priorities track their impact. So if you don't collect these metrics, that is perfectly fine. Again, we are asking these questions around metrics in the application in the spirit of collaborative learning. So next you'll see on this slide are expectations around reporting. These expectations are specific to the grant pathways listed. For the sunset grants, no reporting is expected. For the capacity building grants, we are asking grantees to report on the development of the specific organizational capacity they were funded to build and how that capacity facilitated the organization's ability to achieve their goals. Now, for the collective impact planning grantees, the research, learning, and evaluation team will collaborate with grantees to develop an evaluation plan during that planning period. This evaluation plan will include co-creating key performance indicators that are feasible to track and easy to collect. So the last thing we really want grantees to try is to measure their success of their project based on key performance indicators that are not feasible for them to measure in the context of their project. So again, for the collective impact, the expectation is around the implementation plan at the end of that planning phase, and the evaluation plan will be part of it. However, the research, learning, and evaluation team will be collaborating with these grantees. Next slide. So now that I've given you a little bit of a high-level overview of the metrics and reporting expectations, we're going to begin our Q&A momentarily. But we do have some upcoming webinars that we want to let you know about. One being really important is the project grants and also the research grants. Those webinars are listed here on the slide. So please visit our website and register for these grant opportunities because they're coming out again October 15th. So with that, we're going to open our Q&A, and I will pass it over to Dr. DeAngela Burns-Wallace to get that started.
Okay, here we go. So we will do this in such a way that we are pulling in questions live. We have a team behind us that is taking your questions, pulling them together into themes so that we can try to answer as many and cover as many things as possible. They also will periodically drop things into the chat. If there are specific links or information on the website that can better give you details on the question. I will field the questions and pepper them to Allison and Dr. Yvonne. I'll answer a few along the way. I will say, as I did in our first webinar, if you see me squinting or making a face, it is not because of anything that Dr. Yvonne or Allison may be saying. It's because I'm trying to read from 3 different screens all at one time on my computer as we try to navigate through as many questions as possible. All right, so let's jump right in here. I'm going to grab a one or two, and then I'm going to pitch some to Allison and Dr. Yvonne. One question around the capacity building grant. Is the capacity building grant a matching grant? It is not a matching grant. It is not structured as a matching grant. So that's a quick answer on that. There is a question about eligibility if you are not a 501c3. Allison addressed this early on in that you still are able to apply. It must be for charitable related activities. And there is an FAQ on our website that we encourage you to check out as well. It gives a little bit more detail. But yes, you can apply if you are not a 501c3 public charity, but there are other considerations that do impact that. All right, Allison, I'm going to shoot this one to you. Can you talk a little bit about whether or how project teams or researchers might approach the Kauffman program officers to discuss fit or the appropriateness of their projects and ideas?
Yes. So our approach to grant making this year is different than in previous years. This year, our intent is really to get information, as much information out as possible, as consistently as possible to as many people as possible. That is a shift away from previous practices, and it means that we are not in a place where we are going out and proactively talking to potential applicants and helping shape their application. The goal behind this is to create more equitable pathways for applicants to apply and to create more transparency behind our processes. So if you have questions, you're in the right place. We encourage you to ask them here. We are not going to give specific organizational feedback, but we can certainly answer more questions around the intent behind certain grants or parameters or things to consider. Both project and research are also a letter of interest so that people can answer a few questions. Those will be accepted on a rolling basis starting on the October 15th. And then we're going to have 2 windows throughout the year where we move some of those LOIs onto applications. So that's also an opportunity to get feedback if you are asked to move forward.
Great. And there are work office hours. I don't know if there may be some coming up in the future as well, Allison, but people should check the website for those opportunities as they become available.
Yeah, that's right. We just completed 4 office hours. We will offer more. I don't think they're actually scheduled yet, but we'll put those on social media and our website as they get finalized.
Perfect. There's a question about the Sunset Grant. It says, are recipients of RFP of the past, so if you were a grant recipient through an RFP initiative, are they not eligible for the Sunset Grant? I did not see the specification in the definition of Sunset Grant. That is correct. Former RFP recipients are not eligible for the Sunset Grants. Allison, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
That I would add just one more detail that Sunset Grant applicants, those who are eligible, need to have received funding for 3 of the past 5 years. So really, these are focused on organizations that have relied on funding from us historically and no longer see alignment.
Great. All right. Let's keep moving through. Understanding Kansas City region is a key priority geography for the foundation. Is there any opportunity outside of the Kansas City region that'll be will be considered? And so we continue to get many questions around being located in Kansas City. And so I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll ask Allison to join in as well. So first and foremost, we will reiterate, you don't have to be in the Kansas City region to apply to for the funding. What we are looking for as we foreground the work in Kansas City, our ties to Kansas City, impact that can be elevated in Kansas City, that the learning can be leveraged into Kansas City, that there are ties in some way in the work that helps us think about how we are able to move and shape equitable economic mobility for this region. And so there are many cities that look and feel and have different demographics similar to Kansas City, but the work has to be related in some way. And that's an important point of as we think about how we foreground Kansas City in this work. And so, Allison, do you want to add in that?
You did a great job with that. I would just add that in the questions in the application, there are a couple that say, if you're not located in Kansas City, how can you demonstrate potential for impact in Kansas City? That's really the line we're looking at, because the only way we're going to get to our vision in 2035 is making sure we are foregrounding impact in Kansas City. So again, you don't have to physically be here, but you have to be able to draw the connection to how that could potentially impact Kansas City.
Perfect. All right, moving through, do you have, and this, Allison, I'm gonna ask you to grab this one. Do you expect to have other rounds of grant making available to system change efforts outside of the Kansas City area?
So our intent is to open up the collective impact planning process again next fall. We want the lead entities for those collective impact applications to be based in Kansas City or to have historical experience and success in Kansas City. That doesn't mean all coalition partners need to be based in Kansas City. So if there's a national partner or a partner in another city that's really learned a lot and wants to leverage those learnings, or is bringing in assets that aren't currently in Kansas City, you are welcome to be part of a coalition and collective impact. But our collective impact opportunities are ultimately focused on impact in Kansas City.
Right. Dr. Yvonne, I'm gonna pull you into this conversation. There's a question around the metrics and reporting as they apply to the research grants. I know you mentioned there is a webinar specific to the research grants coming up. I don't know if you want to try to touch on this.
Yeah.
Now.
I can talk about it. So with the research grants, again, as Dr. Burns-Wallace mentioned, October 15th is the date. So I do see some questions in the chat around research and what we're interested in. And again, October 15th is when that will be launched and available on our website. So please, please, please register for those webinars. But no, there are not metrics specifically or reporting specifically around the metrics that apply to the research grants. The research grants are going to be, based on the research that is proposed. But we will be working, again, our research officers will be working with the research grants to see what makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to capture those metrics for your research proposal, then that wouldn't be something that would be expected from the research grants. So again, please check out on October 15th, visit our website, and you'll get lots more information.
One more, Dr. Yvonne, can proposals represent a stream of research over a couple of years?
So with the research grants, they can be multi-year grant awards. So it's not limited to 1 year, for example. And again, it will depend on what you propose. So in the context of the letter of interest, which again, we'll have more specifics on that on October 15th, can make a determination then. But again, you can also propose that your research grant be multi-year grants.
Great. All right, I'm gonna rapid fire a few of these that I think to pull us through. If an organization applies for a grant and does not receive it, can that organization still apply for event sponsorship within the same year? The answer to that is yes. There's a sponsorship area on our funding page. It walks you through our sponsorship process and the application that is for that. So yes, that organization can still apply for an event sponsorship. The grant and the grant application and that event sponsorship is slightly different. And so it would not preclude them for applying for event sponsorship. There's a question around real world learning. If you're currently a recipient in the real world learning, can you apply for a project focus area or must you wait till your real world learning grant to be completed? Allison, do you want to answer that?
Yes, you can apply for a project-related grant for work that is building off real world learning. We don't want to see a grant application that's just an extension of what you're currently doing. So something that is distinct and additive to what is happening with real world learning is acceptable.
Great. Allison, can you also talk a little bit about grant budgets for the capacity building grant? The question is, how detailed does the grant budget need to be when applying for the capacity building grant?
Yeah, we are trying to keep the capacity building grant application very simple. So it really is a question of what do you intend to build capacity in, and how will you allocate funding towards that? In a similar vein to the metrics, the reporting is just going to be what capacity have you built and how do you know that? The budget is intended to be simple as well.
All right. Keep moving through. Let's grab a few more. What if the grant funding is less than, or the request for the grant funding is less than 100K for the capacity building grant? Allison.
So the capacity building grants are really intended to benefit organizations that have needs of 100,000, 250,000 in capacity building. If you're a smaller organization or just starting up, it's possible that we're not the right place for you. But we recognize there's, need for more resources as well. And so in our project grants, there will be opportunities for intermediaries that are supporting smaller organizations to pursue funding for that.
There is a question around the reporting requirements for the project grants. Dr. Yvonne, I don't know if you want to speak to this or just encouraging them to join for the project grants webinar in the coming weeks, but I will kick to you.
So thank you. So yes, so definitely please come to the webinar October 15th around the project grants. But again, we have expectations in terms of reporting. And again, it's around the spirit of collaborative learning. And so project grants will be working with our evaluation and learning officer, and we'll be helping them support them in their evaluation and metrics areas. But in terms of reporting requirements, our evaluation officer will be working with those cohort of grantees in the spirit of learning. We do know that there might be some interesting practices that grantees do. And so there are learning opportunities amongst the grantees. And so one of our roles will be to make sure that we're sharing those learnings amongst our grantees so we can all have impactful projects. So again, the evaluation officer from our foundation and team will be working directly with the project grantees.
All righty. Keep moving through. All right. There is a clarifying question around the application. It asks for 1 to 2 paragraphs. Is this 1 to 2 paragraphs total or per question? The questions actually in each of them say, like, so the question will say, please answer this question in 1 to 2 paragraphs. The next question might say, with a few sentences, bullet points are okay. So typically within the question, it's trying to give you kind of an estimate of the length of the response, meaning in many of these cases, we're not looking for like pages and pages of information. We're looking for tight, succinct responses and trying to kind of give that, that denote that you don't have to write 5, 6, 10 paragraphs. So when it says 1 to 2 paragraphs, if it is attached to a particular question, it'll say 1 to 2 paragraphs, and it is in relationship to that question, or it's trying to give you an indicator of like the length that we're looking for per question. All right. There's a question that asks, or a set of questions around capital projects. Do the grants support capital projects for new construction to expand existing services? Our grants do not support capital projects through this process. And it asks, can you speak to what grants cannot be used for? On our frequently asked questions, and Allison, you can, I do believe that it's still in that list. There is a list of things that traditionally our grants are not typically used for, and capital projects is one of those. Anything else to add to that, Allison?
Pulling up my cheat sheet right now. So yeah, capital projects, so bricks and mortar, endowments, institutions that discriminate, loans, expenses, or seed capital for a private business. So that's different than potentially applying for funding for loans through a CDFI. Lobbying or political activities, as we talked about. We will not support grants for medical, being physical or mental health expenses. We cannot support anything that is political, and we will not support anything social or fraternal organizations, religious activities, or requests to fund individuals, including direct scholarships. We can fund organizations that provide scholarship, but we will not pay for direct scholarships. I just want to make sure that distinction is clear.
One of the things you mentioned around religious organizations, and so the question is around funding faith-based organizations where their efforts may be, say, an educational effort or an entrepreneurship effort through, the work that they do. And so can you, thinking of religious organizations that are working more in public sector?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I tripped over myself there. It's really, we will not fund religious activities. If they're faith-based organizations that are providing charitable services to the community aligned with our priority areas and focus areas, you can apply.
Thank you. Perfect. Answered, I think, two of our questions with that one right there. All right, let's keep moving us through. Construction. Let's see. All right, this one is about applying across multiple grant types. And so, Allison, I'm going to pitch it to you. The way the question is formed is it's around an organization submitting a project grant, but then applying for a capacity grant. And it says, does that capacity grant need to be related to the scope of the project grant? So I think maybe, and there's a couple of other questions kind of, I think, in that same space. So maybe just talking about again, and I know you mentioned it in your comments around applying for multiple grants and what that means and what that could look like, and helping people think through that best fit grant.
Yeah, so there is some nuance here, but I think the best starting point is to really assume the default is you should only apply for one grant. So what is the grant you need right now that is going to most position you for impact as you think about your work related to our strategic priority areas and focus areas? That said, if you are applying in a collective impact grant as a coalition member, not as the lead, but as a coalition member, and also want to apply for a project or research or capacity grant, you can apply for one of those. So that in that instance, you would be the lead, whereas in the collective impact, you would be a coalition member. For large institutions that have multiple divisions that are doing work that are aligned with multiple priority areas and focus areas, they can apply for multiple grants. But we know there are, only a few of those out there. And so we just want to really distinguish that majority of organizations really should be thinking about one grant, the grant that will best align or position them for impact in the near term.
Thank you. Dr. Yvonne, there a question for you. Will the foundation consider research projects that are already underway for funding?
Thank you for the question. So it depends. It depends on what research you are proposing, but there's nothing that would prevent if it was already underway. Maybe it's a different aspect of your research project that you want to explore, that one part is already funded and you want to get another idea or funding or another part of your research project funded to do something different than what you're already funded for. So again, it will depend.
Right. And then there's also just a question around how long will the LOIs for the research grant be open?
Right, thank you for that. So the LOIs for the research grants are on a rolling basis. So with your letter of interest for the LOIs, let's say you, when they open October 15th, that you're ready to rock and roll, you've submitted your application or submitted your LOI, our team reviews those. And so that will happen at a certain time point. And again, we have specifics about it in our slides, and we'll have specifics on October 15th when we launch it. However, maybe you're not ready to rock and roll right now. You want time to really dissect what we're asking for in terms of the letter of interest. And so maybe you want to, it's probably December. That's okay too. You can still submit your LOI in December as well. So there will be certain areas and certain aspects in terms of timing, and we will let applicants know during that time. But again, I encourage you, they put in the chat the registration for the webinars that are upcoming for project and research. So I do encourage folks that are interested to please register for those events. You can hear more detailed information then.
There's a little bit of nuances there, so it is important if you are considering applying to those to try to join or have a member of your team join those very specific webinars, as there are some nuances between the project and the research grant, as well as the ones that are currently open. To that end, just to kind of put a point of clarification. There's a question that's around the collective impact grant, and it asks about a rolling deadline. There is not a rolling deadline for the collective impact grant. That deadline is November 1st. Okay, so that just making sure that we're really clear about that. The letters of interest that are associated with the project grants and the research grants, those will function differently in terms of having a rolling window for those, but not the collective impact grant, right? And not the capacity grant. The current round of capacity grants is currently open. It will close next week on October 8th. The current round of collective impact grants is currently open. It will close on November 1st. And dates for 2025 are also published on our website around the capacity grants. So just making sure that we're being clear around that. There is, I'm scrolling back through. There is a question about a limited number of awardees for the capacity building grant. And so what I would say is that we aren't walking into our processes with a fixed number of awardees, but understanding that, our funds are not, exhaustive. And so we will be funding the capacity grants this year. Those will be awarded in 2024, and dollars will be moved out and available to those grantees for 2024. We have published the 2025 rounds for the capacity grants, and so we anticipate that we will be providing capacity grants again in the spring and in the fall of 2025. So there are, if you're, as I think Allison talked about, or Dr. Yvonne mentioned as well, if maybe your organization is not quite ready to apply for that capacity grant now, there will be other opportunities in 2025. And we're trying to kind of make that information more broadly available so that people feel comfortable knowing that those opportunities will still exist next year. All right, let's see.
Dr. D, can I add a detail about collective
Please do.
impact too, just because the timing question is a good one. So we were pretty intentional in setting the timeline, the deadline November 1st, because we do want to identify the planning grantees as soon as possible, hopefully before the end of the calendar year, so they can jump into 9 months of planning in January. That means this collective impact grant opportunity is really focused on existing or emerging coalitions. If you've been circling around a systems level problem you want to address, but you don't have a coalition or you haven't had conversations, this is not the time for you to apply, but you can start having those conversations and thinking about it and get ready to apply for collective impact a year from now. And so if you're not ready for it, you may want to consider one of the other opportunities as well to help you get there.
There's a question about how many years can program grant projects span? Again, the program grant webinars are next week. Allison, do you want to talk about these being multi-year projects?
Sure. So project grants are intended to be multi-year because we're really looking at organizations who are positioned to grow impact over time. And we know that's hard to do in 1 year. So a minimum of 2 years, it could be 2 or 3, and there may be some exceptions for 4 or 5, but we're mentioning most will apply for 2 to 3 year grants.
Okay. There's a question. So this one says, can a project grant involve multiple organizations? And so I would say that while a project grant could involve multiple organizations, as we know organizations work together and support that and honor that, there is only one entity that can actually apply. And so there would be a singular entity that would be the grantee, but a part of their project, they and we welcome the opportunity to identify that you are partnering or working closely or tightly with other organizations. And I actually think, if I'm not mistaken, on the project grant application, it actually asks, are there other entities that you work with or that are doing similar work in the field that you have relationships with? Allison, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that. Again, this is for the project grant, and they're asking, can it involve multiple organizations?
I think you answered it perfect. Yeah, we want to see as much, coalition and collaboration happening across all the grants as possible. We recognize the collective impact one really speaks to that. But if there's an opportunity for collaboration with partners and projects, we certainly encourage it, recognizing again, only one organization would be considered the grantee.
All right, the last question I'm seeing in queue right now is, if your grant application wasn't selected the first time, could you reapply in the same year? And I think some of that is a depends, and it depends on what type of grant you're talking about and when our cycles run. And so what I would say is that if you find yourself in that situation, it'll be important, one, to understand which grant cycle, if you were a fit for that, if maybe you may be a better or different fit for another grant pathway. And so, Allison, I don't know if you want to speak just a little bit to just how people may want to think about how they might move through our processes, given that we have multiple rounds that we're identifying.
Yeah, we have developed all of our timelines with intentionality, recognizing there could be some fluidity. So an organization may want to apply for one grant. If they don't move forward, they could apply for another in the spring. And if you're not ready to apply for one grant, but you want the time to get ready, you could apply for that in the spring. So that opportunity certainly presents itself, assuming, again, you're aligned with our focus areas and priority areas.
Right, kind of a different variation on a question we just answered. Can capacity grants be split between two organizations or areas? And I would say the short answer to that is really no. That's not really the design of what the capacity grants is. If there are two organizations that are interested in applying for capacity grants, if you do work with another organization and part of that is something that you need to highlight or it's a potential to highlight, that's great. But the question around, can a capacity grant be split between two organizations? That I would say the short answer to that is no. All right. Let's see. So this question is, how are you ensuring that grassroots organizations who may be working on collective impact work, but who are not at scale to be on the radar of the foundation, have access to this funding? And Allison, I'm going to pitch to you for this one as we think about the larger collective impact work and some of the questions that we're asking around the coalition building.
Yeah, so I will start with, we are not in a position to be all things to everyone, but we really have tried to create grant making pathways that meet organizations where they are as much as possible in the vein of impact. And so if you're not yet on the radar and want to focus on a capacity building grant to build out your visibility and presence or coalition building, you can do that. If you're really interested in collective impact, once we've identified who the planning grantees are, we are going to create opportunities for people to express an interest to be partnered and just create an open resource to the planning grantees if they are looking for more partners. So we'll do some, I'd say, passive matchmaking once the planning grantees are identified. But beforehand, that is just not possible given there's a larger number of people applying than we even know.
Oh. All right, I have a couple more coming in. Hold on. Are capacity building grants ideal for building capacity on a new project launch? And so, Allison, I'm going to ask you to speak to this.
Sure. Capacity building grants are really intended to build internal capacity. So whatever that looks like to help you increase your impact over time. So it could be anywhere from proposing to receive funds to do leadership development for your whole team, or to purchase new supplies to expand a program over time, or to bring on somebody to help develop your communications and website. We're really thinking about capacity in a pretty broad sense and want to look to you for the answers of what that means, knowing that this grant is really intended for one-time capacity needs. So I want to emphasize that, we don't want to, we want to make sure you are set up for long-term sustainability. So the capacity grants are really intended for one-time needs. If you ultimately need to bring somebody on board and you want to use this funding for 1 year to cover the costs and don't have any sense of where that funding would come in future years, that is going to be a flag. If you want to bring somebody on to help with fundraising so that you have additional funding in future years, that's a capacity that makes sense. If you are applying for a project grant and need to do some planning and designing before you move to implementation, that is also okay. So it can be okay for an applicant to apply for a multi-year project, recognizing that year one may be more of a planning or capacity building year as you move towards implementation in future years.
All right, this question is a little bit broader. It is asking kind of about our kind of focus areas as I would identify it. The question reads, is the foundation having conversations around supporting small LLCs founded by BIPOC individuals that are focused on public goods, having access to funds? The issue is that too many BIPOC entrepreneurs have to do nonprofit orgs in order to get funding. But this runs counter to economic mobility. One of the things is that a body of our work over time has been in and around access to capital and will continue to be in this space. And is that access is why it's one of our clear focus areas as we move forward. Allison, I don't know if you want to add a little bit more around some of the work that we're doing in this in a broader way that goes not only just in the grant space, but beyond that in terms of some of our other partnerships.
Sure. So I will say, again, we cannot fund a business directly, but we can fund nonprofits or third parties that are doing services that are aligned with charitable services to support entrepreneurs. So that could mean increasing access to capital. It could mean increasing sense of belonging for entrepreneurs. It could mean increasing skills and awareness for entrepreneurs who have an idea but aren't necessarily sure how to build out their business plan or grow the revenue. So we will be looking for organizations that are entrepreneurial support organizations or others that might be well positioned to support entrepreneurs in those ways.
And access to capital continues to be one of the areas that we have worked in and will continue to work in and have a great interest around the work that we have done, not only in this region, but across the nation. So I see that my question queue is now here. I want to first and foremost thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As we've noted, we have a couple of deadlines that are coming up, so we encourage you to check out the website, make sure you're feeling comfortable and aligned if you are considering applying, and check out our frequently asked questions on the website as we continue to update them, add additional things as we come out of our webinars. If you are planning to apply for the project or research grants or considering that in your future, we strongly encourage you to hop into one of those two webinars or have a member of your team join one of those webinars in the next week. I'm excited about just the conversation and we appreciate all of you coming out today and asking the questions. We hope that we have answered all the questions today. We know that there will be more. Do not hesitate to reach out. Our website gives you a way to email or to ask other additional questions. We are here to try to be responsive and to help you find your best pathway as part of our process. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us today.